Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazzo.
God bless you, friends. He is moving, and I thank you for sharing the podcast. We've got our fundraiser going on now. We are going to get to Liberty Sentinel Media CEO Alex Newman in just a minute, but I have to remind you that we have an opportunity to expand our reach here with the help of Pioneer Network, Beck TV, and God's Learning Channel. So if you have not already made a donation, a tax-deductible donation to Worldview Matters, you can do that, and you would also get an opportunity to pick your choice of gifts, and we'll gladly send these out to you. One-time gift of $200 or a monthly gift of $25. We'll send you a signed copy of Alex Newman's new book, Indoctrinating Our Children to Death. And I've got my copy right here. Or you can get a copy of my latest book, Assault on the Image of God. First-time donors will receive the classic mug here, Worldview Matters mug, with my trademark on one side, keep speaking the truth about things that matter, Worldview Matters on the other side. The website, worldviewmatters.tv, to get more info, watch other podcasts, or make a tax-deductible gift. Now, a couple people that just got in on the fun. Polly from Green Bay, Wisconsin. Michael from Mexico City. God bless you, brother. Shelly from LeClaire, Iowa. And more will be coming in because we just started our spring week and a half, 2 weeks, whatever we do here, just reminding you that we're viewer and listener supported. So Alex Newman's got a brand new book out. We're going to get to that, Indoctrinating Our Children to Death. And he's here with us. He's had a lot of exposure recently. I love the work that this man does. One of my favorite international correspondents, and you can use the word journalist to describe him without putting air quotes on it. Alex Newman, good to see you, brother.
Best introduction ever. Thank you, Dan. It's an honor to be a journalist without air quotes. There are not many of those left in the world today, so really appreciate it. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you are part of the remnant. So, and I want to mention just briefly, I got the signed copy of Alex's book. He did now. It may be hard to read, but he did sign it. I know because he was here at Freedom Project. So, brother, good to see you connecting from Florida. Congrats on the recent exposure you've gotten with Newsweek, with Glenn Beck, with others. But you were recently in Wisconsin at Liberty Pastors, Paul Blair, and great men of God, great program, great conference. Tell us about that boot camp in Milwaukee recently.
Well, thank you, brother. Again, it's a great honor to be with you. If you need me to decipher that chicken scratch masquerading as handwriting, I'll be happy to do it after the show. I joke with people because there was a study of literacy back in 1812 by DuPont de Nemours, and he found after his research that not more than 4 in 1,000 young Americans were unable to write legibly, even neatly. And, I can't write legibly, even neatly, and yet only 4 in 1,000 young people back in the day before government schools could not write legibly, even neatly. So how far we have fallen. Yeah. Turning to Liberty Pastors, it was so much fun. It always is. We've done many of these across the country. You, of course, have been at some of them, and we sure appreciate that. Great opportunity for pastors to just delve deep into what the Word of God teaches across a whole range of fields that, unfortunately, very frequently are not taught at seminary. They're not taught in typical sermons by typical pastors. And yet, the Apostle Paul spoke boldly about preaching the whole counsel of God, the full counsel of God, depending on what translation you use. And if we're honest with ourselves, a lot of the shepherds today are not doing that. They're worried about their tax exemption. They're worried about maybe offending somebody in the congregation. And so we'll just do 52 different versions of John 3:16, mostly out of context, and call it a year. But the reality is God's Word teaches on education. God's Word teaches on globalism. God's Word teaches very extensively on government, the role of government. So all these things are important for the body of Christ. All these things are necessary for equipping the saints to properly serve as salt and light in this world, to properly carry out the Great Commission. And so we've done a lot of these. It's been incredible to see what God is doing through it. We had some incredible speakers there, people who've been, of course, on your program, like Bill Federer was with us. We had Curtis Bowers, the great Curtis Bowers. David Barton was there. Just really great Americans. K. Carl Friedrichs, just really great people there.
Yeah, and they are continuing up until this election in November to try to get in all the swing states, or as many as they can, and just they jump from state to state. God bless them for this vision, Alex, because if the pastors are not informed and equipped, we're in a lot of trouble. So how are they supposed to equip their congregations? Equipping the saints. But so let's move on, because we've talked more about that, and we have. But you were recently on with Glenn Beck. Congrats. I shared that interview. I watched the whole thing, and that's huge for me with the time I have but it was so compelling, and he asked great questions about massive worldview issues when it comes to globalism, when it comes to America. So just first of all, if you could just condense what that was like, that experience going down there. You were great, composed, confident, articulate. It was just amazing. I was so proud of my brother. But share what that was about. And then the article we have here, Google censors Alex Newman and the Liberty Sentinel after being on Glenn Beck's podcast. So first, going down there and being with Beck, great. Again, you guys look it up. Great interview. Alex, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Dave. So Beck is a great guy. He's really been on the front lines of bringing the truth to people. Back when he was on CNN, he was bringing people the truth. Back when he was on Fox, amazingly, he was bringing the truth.
Yeah.
And then eventually he had to go independent, much like many other truth tellers. You don't last long in the controlled opposition media or the fake mainstream media if you tell the truth. So he's gone off now and done his own thing. It was a great pleasure to be there with him. I think our segment was about an hour and 20 minutes. I actually didn't realize how enormous his audience was. As that started airing Friday morning, I was getting texts and emails and phone calls from all over the country. Hey, you're on the radio with Glenn Beck. That's so cool. So it was a lot of fun. We really talked mostly about the global cabal, the global effort to subvert human liberty and bring us under kind of a technocratic one world government with principles that are radically different from those that underpin our country, radically different from the biblical principles that God reveals through his word. So we had a lot of fun with that, talked about kind of the history of this, where it came from, where it's going, what we can do as people who don't like that vision, as people who appreciate the principles and the values of our founding fathers. And so I encourage people to watch it. It was a lot of fun. Obviously, it's being very heavily suppressed by the big tech companies. Glenn Beck's got, I think, 1.3 million subscribers on YouTube. I think only 120,000 have seen it on YouTube so far. So they're really, really trying to suppress that. But that's okay. God's still getting it out, and that will continue. So,
yeah, I remember I used to watch him on Fox. I never watched CNN, but I watched him. He would bring out the big blackboard, the huge blackboard, and just draw the chart and just explain things. And it was just so helpful, the way he did it. And he tackled things that a lot of people didn't. So, by the way, the website for Alex is libertysentinel.org. And also the book is on Amazon, Indoctrinating Our Children to Death on Amazon or Liberty Sentinel. But so I pull up Google. You're number one when you search for Alex Newman. When you search, it comes up on Yahoo, it comes up on Microsoft Bing, and also DuckDuckGo. But what did Google do? You're number 87. How did that happen? How does such a thing happen, Alex?
Yeah, well, we've known for a long time that Google was rigging its algorithms to try to suppress the truth. In fact, they've talked about this pretty openly. The UN communications czar, Melissa Fleming, actually was bragging that the UN had entered into a partnership with Google to suppress what they consider to be inaccurate information on climate change. Of course, the most inaccurate information on climate change has come out of the UN. Anybody who looks back at their track record will see that very clearly. They've been wrong on every falsifiable prediction that they have made on this issue going back 40 years. Every single falsifiable prediction has been wrong. So if they were really interested in suppressing misinformation, the UN would be buried. But instead, they're burying me. They're burying Liberty Sentinel. They're burying the New American Magazine. They're doing it, of course, very strategically and very deliberately. And for many years, if you would put Alex Newman into Google, you'd get my articles at the New American. You'd get the Liberty Sentinel. You would get my articles at the Epoch Times. You'd get my articles in different publications that I'm working on. Somehow, and I don't know exactly the mechanism, but somehow they have now rigged this so that you get endless pages of totally useless stuff that has nothing to do with anything, before you can finally get to my website. And they're doing that on purpose, of course. And anybody can go to any other search engine. You can go to Yahoo, Bing, DuckDuckGo, Search.Brave, every single other website. You put in my name, first result is libertysentinel.org, not Google. Google, we were number 87 the last time we looked.
So that's part of the battle. I call it the one-party big tech media conglomerate, and many of us, truth proclaimers and defenders, have been affected by it. So it's obvious. Now, tell us about the Liberty Sentinel Substack, because that's a way that people can get in touch with you guys.
Yeah, appreciate it, Dave. So one of the ways that people can follow what we're doing, just sign up for the newsletter. It's through Substack. It's absolutely free unless people want to become a paid subscriber. It's like $5 a month if they choose to do that, but absolutely free. Twice a week, you'll get in your inbox all the latest stuff that we're working on, including sometimes special deals on books and other things like that, invitations to wherever we're going to be next in the country. And that's all, again, for free at libertysentinel.org.
So next, last month, you wrote an article that made Newsweek. American education needs a pro-parent overhaul. I want to ask you about submitting this, because it is an opinion piece. I haven't been too fond of Time or Newsweek, but I'm thankful for this opportunity to get you some exposure. How did that come to be? And did you have to, knowing you were submitting it to Newsweek, did you have to pull back on any of the things you would normally share, like when you're out speaking or maybe on Worldview Matters or other? Did you kind of word it differently because you thought Newsweek might censor you or not publish it? What do you think?
Yeah, so it actually came about. I was on a TV program on One American News with one of the editors over at Newsweek. And he said, hey, you ought to submit something on education. So he gave me the contact information for the relevant editor, and I pitched the idea. He said, yeah, send it over. We'll take a look. I thought, wow, okay, well, nothing to lose. So I sent it over. I didn't come out and just lay it all on the table. Although I was actually very impressed, because I wrote in a piece advocating for the dismantling of the public education system, which obviously, even though that's the sensible thing, it's also still very, very controversial. Yep. So I was quite surprised when they said, we'll take it, we'll publish it. I was very pleased with that. I intend to submit some additional ones going forward. But, I think one of the things that's happening, Dave, is that people are realizing that the fake media, the liberal media, has been trying to shove establishment-approved talking points down everybody's throats for so long. The recent poll that came out, 60% of Americans regard the mainstream media as enemies of the people. And, even just from a business perspective, the people who own these publications, they realize they're bleeding money, they're hemorrhaging readers. Nobody wants to advertise in something that nobody's reading. And so they're saying, well, hey, we better start at least pretending like we're going to include some voices that have been marginalized, to use the terminology du jour. We need some diversity and maybe some inclusion of maybe people who don't think like we do. So I'm encouraged by that. I think we're going to see more of that, because what's happening is the liberal media is suffering financially, catastrophically in many cases. And if they want to keep making money, they have to stop preaching lies and propaganda, and they have to start sharing views and news and information that people are actually interested in.
Yeah. In the article, by the way, you mentioned the debate around public education shifting dramatically. You say almost 2/3 of Americans are dissatisfied with the quality of public education. I'm surprised it's not more than that at this point. Yep. And you also say only about 1 in 3 students are proficient in core subjects. This has been going on for decades, Alex, has it not?
It absolutely has been. Yep. It's actually been going on for over a century. It's just been getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Like you, I'm shocked that there's still almost 1/3 of people who are not dissatisfied with the government indoctrination system. The only thing I can conclude is that these are people who don't have anything to do with it and don't realize how bad it is. They probably don't have kids in there. They don't teach in there. They just know what the fake media tells them. So that's probably where they found that third. But it is so unbelievably bad, you almost can't believe it. So I tried to include just a little bit of the information, just the tip of the iceberg there about what's happening, so people could get a sense of how bad it is, and then propose a serious solution.
I'm glad you were able to give a little bit of info that the typical Newsweek reader might not get in other places. But we have to take a brief pause. When we come back, we're going to talk about Alex's brand new book, Indoctrinating Our Children to Death. And we are also going to mention an article or an interview that he did recently called Could Biden Use Executive Order to Let Illegals Vote? We'll talk about that with Alex Newman when we come back.
Introducing Patriot Mobile, the wireless carrier that stands with you. We are committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
Get free activation now with promo code DAVID. Quickly, friends, if you're interested in sponsoring Worldview Matters like Harbinger's Daily or Patriot Mobile, please send us an email, worldviewmatters@fpeusa.org, and our producer will get right back to you. Alex Newman, Liberty Sentinel, our guest today. Could Biden use executive order to let illegals vote? We do want to get to Alex's book, but I had to ask him about this. He recently interviewed Catherine Engelbrecht, and she's a leading figure in the fight for election integrity. And Alex, tell us about that. She is with True the Vote, actually the founder. So what can people learn about this? Because we're concerned about the porous, and that's an understatement, southern border. So please share the nuts and bolts about this interview before we dive into your book.
Well, thank you. So Catherine Engelbrecht has been kind of at the forefront of fighting back, at least on some of the key issues of election integrity. They really have done a lot of great work in terms of lawsuits, in terms of exposing what's going on. And now she's sounding the alarm. I was very happy to be able to bring her on about the possibility that Joe Biden will use an executive order to allow illegal immigrants to vote. One of the things she talked about is that they're already pressuring state governments to go ahead and register people who are not eligible to vote We're talking illegals, we're talking felons. The DOJ is actually threatening and pressuring state governments to register prisoners. Why would you do that, right? In most states, felons are not eligible to vote. Why would you go out there and pester people to register people who we all know are not eligible to vote? And there's only one explanation. They hope that they will use these illegal voter registrations to either have the wiggle room there to steal the vote later or enroll future Democrats into voting for Democrats. So dangerous all around. This is a crisis that we're facing right now. It's a repeat of 2020, and we have got to get it under control.
What are your thoughts? I wasn't planning on asking about this, about the executive order, just the constitutionality of it, and whether it's Republicans or Democrats in the White House. Shouldn't it be something that should be left up to the Senate, the House, actually legislatively, other than executive order? Is that too much power for the executive branch?
It is absolutely too much power for the executive branch. Now, there's a place for executive orders, right? They've been used from the beginning of the American Republic. And these are things like, hey, order more paper clips for the office, right? Make sure we have different types of coffee when we have guests here. This isn't for policy making. This is not for legislating. In fact, the Constitution is very clear. All legislative powers are with the Congress. I mean, it's almost verbatim what the Constitution says. If all legislative powers are vested in Congress, that means zero legislative power is vested in the presidency or in the Supreme Court. And yet we've turned it almost upside down, right? We've now got policy mostly coming out of the executive branch and the courts, and the Congress just rubber stamps the budgets that the presidents send to them. It's completely backwards. Not even to mention the fact that they don't have the authority to legislate on the vast majority of areas where the federal government is now active. You can find the whole list of the authorities and responsibilities delegated to the federal government. They're in Article 1, Section 8. Read it. Very simple, very short. And we've got to get back to that understanding if we're going to stop our descent into tyranny and collapse.
So let's jump into the book, Alex. And I know we don't have a lot of time. We have talked about it in the past, and we've talked a lot about education issues. We think we've talked a lot about John Dewey, Horace Mann, and others. And that's really the first 5 chapters in your book talk about the genesis of public schools, collectivism, Horace Mann, John Dewey, replaced Christianity with collectivist humanism. So I wanted to give you just a little ribbing, though, because about 150 pages into your book, after all the wonderful endorsements, that's when, I'm kidding, Kirk Cameron, Alex Jones, Dr. Peter McCullough, General Michael Flynn, Pete Hegseth, James Lindsay, Abraham Hamilton III, and it goes on and on. Greg Hunter, Sam Sorbo. Oh my goodness! And I'm looking at pages and pages. William Federer, Dran Reese. I think Paul Blair was in there. I mean, yep. Israel Wayne. When does it stop? And I'm going, man, this is the most endorsements I've ever seen. So it must be an important and a phenomenal book. But so let's go to chapter 6. That might be some history that people are not as familiar with. The Frankfurt School, weaponizing U.S. education against civilization. Give us a little synopsis of that chapter.
Sure. Thank you, Dave. And honestly, the way all the endorsements came about, I sent out about 50, expecting to get a handful of responses.
Right.
Trust me, I was very surprised when I got back like 48 or 49. So I'm very honored, incredibly humbled to have all these great Americans, great leaders in ministry, military, business. Just incredible honor to have them standing by my side in promoting the rescuing of our children, the stopping of this horror. But the Frankfurt School is really, really a critical piece of the puzzle in understanding what happened, not just to education, but to our country. This was an organization, it was called the Institute for Social Research, set up at the University of Frankfurt. It was actually a project of the Comintern, the Communist Internationale, and they basically concluded, without really formally admitting, that Karl Marx was wrong. His idea that revolution was inevitable and the working class was inevitably going to rise up and wage war on the bourgeoisie, they finally conceded without conceding that was not going to happen, especially in Western Europe, especially in the United States. People were just happy, right? They had good jobs. One husband could support his wife and children and pay off the mortgage and have a car and, send the kids to college. People were just not ready to have revolution. So they figured, we've got to infiltrate the culture. We've got to break down the big obstacles to our takeover. And they identified those obstacles as Christianity, the church, the family, and the cultural morals and mores that were keeping people basically in a counter-revolutionary mood. So this organization got set up in Frankfurt. They were international socialists. Adolf Hitler was a national socialist, so they had some inter-socialist disputes. They ended up coming to the United States with the help of the Rockefellers and John Dewey, by the way, the founding father of America's so-called public education system. And right away, they started infiltrating all of our educational institutions, starting with Columbia University, the University of California, and promoting these toxic, horrific ideas. One of the big things that they loved to promote was the idea that the American father, the American husband, was an authoritarian, lording it over his family, the evil patriarchy, right? And they knew strategically, dads and husbands are going to protect their families. Dads and husbands are a big obstacle to this takeover because they love their wives, they love their children, they're going to do everything possible to protect them. So they started undermining the father, undermining the husband within the household. They promoted this idea that we needed to just bombard the culture with perversion, promiscuity, homosexuality, whatever nasty thing they thought they could get away with, they started pumping out into the culture. Pornography, of course, promoting fornication, try to break down the family unit, try to corrupt art, try to corrupt culture, and it was just a disaster. And education really was the primary vehicle they used to spread this toxic poison throughout our society.
And you think about it, if you go back 100 years, or a little bit less maybe, they've been very successful at the marketing of evil, and they have infiltrated every major institution in America, and they've been very good at it, and I don't give them credit. It's disappointing. But I want to mention some other chapters. You talk about UNESCO in chapter 9, chapter 12, Big Brother schools using big data to manipulate and spy on kids. We saw a little bit of that. You were trying to raise awareness, and so was Dr. Duke Pesta and others when Common Core was rolled out about that. Chapter 16, Trading Academics for Far Left Social Emotional Learning. 17, Schools Using Fake History to Kill America. Chapter 20, The Totalitarian Agenda Behind LGBT Sex Ed Revolution at School. But I want to go back to Chapter 13, Alex, because this is what we're seeing on steroids. And I don't know why. I don't, for the life of me, I can't understand why more Christians, more parents, more concerned citizens are not resisting this, the sordid history and deadly consequences of sex ed at schools. And you write about Alfred Kinsey. I look at him as one of the most dangerous people that are ruling America from beyond the grave. Karl Marx, John Dewey, Margaret Sanger, Alfred Kinsey, and still Indiana University gives him a statue. So talk a little bit about that, because that's what we're seeing now, this radicalized sex ed, and is there a way to stop it?
Yeah, so Alfred Kinsey was a vile, vile individual. He was a sex maniac, a pervert, a sadomasochist, a pedophile, trained a bunch of other pedophiles to abuse children, and after relentless abuse of these children, including babies, by the way, they concluded that these children actually enjoyed the abuse, and therefore we must sexualize your kids the moment we can pry them loose from their mothers in pre-kindergarten, if possible. So that's really the origin of this horrific assault on our children when it comes to sex things in our public schools and in the entertainment world. It all goes back to this filthy, filthy, filthy pervert. Very, very sad. And I cannot understand, and I never will understand, how parents could continue to subject their children to this stuff. You know, we hear people say, well, I'm fighting against the porn in the schools. Yeah, but you're still sending your children to the schools, right? Why would you do that? So we've got to understand there's a really broad agenda here. It's about more than just sexualizing your children. There's a much broader agenda here. They actually pioneered this even 50 years before Alfred Kinsey came on the scene as a means of undermining the family, undermining the church, and replacing those key institutions that God ordained with the state, with the objective of having a total state by the time the process is done.
And there's so much more in the book, and even an hour and a half, 2-hour interview would not do it justice, because you've got a great bibliography and index here with citations, but also the afterword talks about a Christian vision of education. What does the Bible say? And it's probably just the opposite of what we have in America. But we've run out of time, Alex. It always goes by so fast with you. LibertySentinel.org, Amazon.com. The book is doing very well. Congrats. And by the way, are you getting any censorship from Amazon or other places? I know you are on Google.
So far, Amazon has allowed us to sell the book through there, and they have not given us any trouble. I don't know whether they're suppressing it in any way, but so far it's selling very, very well. We're very pleased, and we're thankful for that. And I'm very thankful for you having me on the program, Dave. Thank you for all that you do.
Well, God bless you, brother. Always great to see you, and get your signed copy, friends, by supporting Worldview Matters this next week or two with a donation. Brother, Godspeed, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. God bless you.
All right, guys, so much more in the book, and I printed out all these pages of notes. I'd get to like 10% of them. Almost happens every time. But again, check out Alex's writing, LibertySentinel.org. God bless you. We'll see you next time. And as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter.